Do 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 do. Look at that giant jowl. I'm gonna jowl gonna jowl all over you, my jowly, my sexy jowl. Jowls actually look quite cute on. I like women with a nice jowl, kind of, and makes their chin look sort of neat. So I'm looking a bit girly today with my jowl sticking out. It's probably the angle of the light. When the angle of the light gets wrong, what I'll do is I'll do this. Maybe it'll nope. Will make my jowl disappear. Just don't look into the light on this side of the page. Anyway, okay, jowl time. Watch this. It's a teleporter. Pew, pew. Two rings. It's like in Stargate. Okay. So today we're going to talk about a very serious issue. Okay, so I'm warning you before it begins that it gets quite heavy. This topic. It's a topic called nesting. Now, it's a very, very evil thing you can do to make things work really, really well for you. Now, Mulligan. So nesting. I've used nesting before on my flying car. If you press the two, what was it called? The lens, the pressure lens that makes the equal and opposite pressure not happen. Basically, the pressure lens is what that was, and it uses heat, I think, to make it work. But the pressure lens is a way to move through space, create an unequal and opposite reaction, and that uses nested rings of rotors pressing against each other. So I drew them earlier. They're just I'll draw it more 3D like. So that's basically what it looks like 3D wise, and they're all spinning at a gradient of speeds. So that's nested rotors, and they're pressing up against each other. And when it gets to the end, it goes against a material that's staying still is pressing on that end, and a material that's staying still is pressing on the other end. And because the speed is slower on that end compared to that, and the speed is faster compared to that, it creates an unequal and opposite force through the fact that that speed is equal to time. So that's the first use of nesting. So there's a thing called a shank, which is used in milling machines, and it should really be used in drills, but they don't use it in drill bits a lot. They use this sort of geary thing with the teeth that come in and stick together and stick to it. It's not a great way to connect things up. The milling machine uses the shank because the shank uses a thing called dry or static friction. So static friction is friction that's like tensile strength or shear strength, that it'll resist being broken up to a certain pressure. And that's what the shank uses, is the more you press it, the more that static pressure goes up. So what I'm talking about here now is nesting those. So this is going to be a side-on view of the shank for all you engineers and technical drawers. So if you can spring load it as well, and you could have drills of all different sizes. And it's basically nesting the shanks. So you can make a drill holder, like a thing for holding drill bits. So that was the idea. That I'll label them with colors. So the inner one is the red one. I've been looking at Blender. I'm thinking I'll start showing some of the stuff in Blender. If it has that sort of Minecrafty interface, I kind of don't like the idea of just kind of being orbiting what you're working on. I like the idea of that you're kind of like you're moving around of your own accord. And I'll leave the outer one white. So this is a side-on view of the Shanks. The red ones are the same. It's basically a cone. So cones nested inside cones. And when you apply enough pressure, it acts like a clutch. And a clutch is the same thing as a brake on your bike or in your car. And it's actually the most powerful engine inside your car. So those connections would be great for drill bits and things like that. The other idea I had was for nested, for bolts, so shank bolts, so bolts that had that sort of profile of just a very, very acute angle, and you press it and it presses so hard on it that the friction causes it to turn. So shank bolts was another invention that comes from that. The other idea was, do you know those gorilla? They're called crocodile. I'll draw it from the top view. I'll draw a green because green kind of it's kind of bolts are made of them. You see them and they're, I'll just use blue, fuck it. Excuse my language. So you use them for, they're pin maps, I call them. It's like that thing you put your hand into and it creates the shape around it. And they use these for bolts, and I kind of never got why they didn't do it a different way. So this is another form of nesting that's going to happen. So you kind of see these things for getting bolts out of they're kind of like spanners, and they get bolts out of things. So it's like that. And as you stick your bolt in around it, the pins take the shape of the bolt, and then you can twist it. And I always thought, why not just nest spanners inside each other? So I'll show you what I mean by that. You can have different shape spanners, like square spanners on that, whatever. But nesting, I'll have to remember. I have a load of them written down. Like that was, why not just nest the actual spanners themselves instead of having all these circular teeth, so for bolts and things like that. So that's another form of nesting. The next one is what I call nested pressure chambers. So the thing is, if you were to take a big lump of steel and just put a ball in the center of it of really high pressure material pushing out on the steel, the outer parts of the steel wouldn't really be able to push in at a certain point. So what would happen is that ball would expand, and then it would crack the material because it wasn't transferring the compressive strengths onto the tensile strengths of the outer bits. So if you just I'll draw it really simply. Oops. Let's see, draw red. Sorry, it's taking a bit of time, this. Okay, so there it is there. So the red layers would be steel and the blue layers would be a hydraulic liquid, and you'd nestle them inside each other and create a huge amount of pressure. This was one of my ideas for the diesel engine, or using cold fusion, just using immense amounts of pressure to achieve that. I'm not sure cold fusion actually works personally, but because I actually think like the sun works a different way. I think the sun creates both matter and heat at the same time. But those pressure vessels will be very, very useful for creating the conditions that are similar to the inside of the Earth, like for making diamonds and that. Now, for another thing I discovered was that material wise, if you made one of those pressure vessels into a sausage, so instead of making diamonds using spheres, but instead using sausages shapes, the amount of mass doesn't goes up evenly to the amount of diamond you're creating. So if you created a sausage vessel rather than a sausage vessel, I'm going to get a lot of sniggers from that one. But anyway, so like that, that would be at the end of that. That I'll draw it real quick. Look, quick. So I forgot the white lump isn't in that, but that's the idea: is a sausage pressure vessel, nested sausage pressure vessel for making diamonds. And the great thing about that is the materials needed to make that pressure vessel will go up evenly proportioned to the amount of diamonds you make. If you made a 3D, it would actually take a lot more matter per the bigger diamonds. But if you got that, you get really long lengths of diamond, and you could grow it out from there. So that's another nested pressure vessel use. Fun with nesting. There's another thing. It's not quite nesting, but it's a use for hydrophobics, which is the ship's hulls. If you spray the ship's hull with hydrophobic material and even its propeller blades, you get rid of all the static friction from the water on the actual material, and you could get really fast boats without actually having to like use special shapes or changing the shapes of the material. Another use for that would be in pipes. If you used hydrophobic materials in pipes, you'd get rid of that static friction, which means you'd need less energy when it comes to pumping stations and things like that. You'd still probably need water hammer arresters and things like that, but you can use water towers to create water hammer arresters and things like that. What else we got? I suppose you could use it to back pump the pipes. Nesting, you see, nesting's quite interesting. If you combined that pressure vessel thing with pumps, so if you had pressure pumps inside pressure pumps inside pressure pumps, you could pump up to very high pressures, because the gradient that the pump would be pumping against wouldn't be so high. So it'd be pumping, say, 100 bar, and then into another 100 bar and 100 bar. So excuse me. So each pump in each successive pressure vessel wouldn't have to use a lot of force to get up to extremely high forces. So you can nest very quickly. Let me think. What else? This episode's going to be a bit slow. It's coming towards the end of the day, and I'm not feeling very well, so I'm just going to go slowly through the nesting ideas. There's nested pressure vessels, nested vacuum vessels. So a metal is slightly porous. That matter overlap thing I talked about in my chemical continuum video lets matter travel through the vacuum. So if you had nested vacuum vessels instead of nested pressure vessels, so it's basically that, but instead of having liquid in between each layer, you had a vacuum, and then you had a pump on each layer, pumping out to the next layer and the next layer. You could have very super high vacuums that are much higher than the ones currently achieved. What else? There's theoretically, you could get a minus pressure. That's where the vacuum, it starts to suck air in. It starts to become like a very high pressure vacuum, or very anti-pressure vacuum. That's a theoretical idea that I played around with the whole pressure vessel. You'd probably need to use plastic linings and different linings and layered different linings to get that sort of thing. And then you could kind of create a sort of like a pop gun that would actually suck things out. The other idea with that would be, if you started doing that, the space inside it would start getting bigger on the inside, and that would create a huge amount of anti-pressure and be able to suck things really quickly and create, as I said, pop guns, which suck energy or suck kinetic energy rather than blowing them. The other stuff, let me think. There was nested pressure vessels, nested vacuum vessels. Nesting. I had a big chapter on nesting. Nesting. There's another idea I had, which was feedback solar panels, which would shine a light on the solar panel. So you would shine a laser on the solar panel, and it would absorb light, and then it would feed back, shining more light back onto the solar panel. That's kind of a nesting. It's not really nesting. Nested pressure vessels. Let me think. Nesting. I had a whole thing of nesting, funnily enough. That was one of them. The nested bolt turners. I also think I came up with another bolt shape, which is like this. So imagine that as your bolt top, but there's a little hole in the side, so you can stick an L key into it and just twist it around or pull it around. That was another idea. Another idea I had was bolts. If you had bolts, so screws on bolts, and you wanted to, so they're bimetallic. So there were, where is it? Well, I'm going to start on a new piece of paper. So bimetallic bolts. Okay, bimetallic bolts. Where's my blue? Where are you? Sharpies here. I could use them. Oh, cool. Okay, Sharpie. Permanent marker. Don't get it on your face, or I'll set that way. I have to. It's very cone shaped, which is quite clever. So imagine a bolt from the side. So that's, excuse my coughing. That's a bolt from the side, and see the way it's wavy, the wavy screw bits, but they're bimetallic. So when you heat them up, they straighten out, and then when they cool down, they become wavy, so you can't turn them. Another version of that was to have pop. To have a pop version of that. So if you took the surface of the screw teeth, if you took the surface of the screw teeth, it would have these little spots on it, and if it was heated above a certain height, the bimetallics would pop up and kind of create a rib, kind of a spotty surface that would prevent turning. But then if you heated them, they'd pop. It'd actually be the other way around. Sorry, you'd heat them up and they'd pop into the little gaps in the teeth. So another idea I had was fold. Do you know when you fold metal? So if you fold something like a toilet piece of paper, or you fold metal and hammer it together, you get like thousands of layers. Then every time you fold it, it doubles. Or if you fold it if you fold it to 10 like that and then smash it down, it'll multiply it by 10. So that's a easy way to get billions and billions and billions of layers. And I thought, why not do that with screw threads? Kind of compress them down and make them so they you have billions and billions and billions of threads around a thing. So when you go to turn it one bit, it would move like a billionth of an inch, or a trillionth of an inch, or a zillionth of an inch, or whatever. But you need to use a special type of screw thread. And this is I'm going to just draw this is a side profile of the shape of the threads would need to be to make it work. So I'll just draw it really quickly. I'll draw them on both sides as well, just to sort of give you an idea of the shape that would work with that, because otherwise the threads would slip. So you'd need these sort of shaped threads for it to work. So this is just the outside threads of the screw. Okay. It's not really turning out great. I'll do it bigger. Sorry, just give me a sec. It'll come out bigger. Okay, I won't be doing it on two sides. It'll just be on one side of the. It's just the thread teeth profile to do that folded, super accurate screw threads for machining. You need to use some sort of invar. Invar tends to be very good at maintaining its shape. And the cooler you make it, the harder it gets, and the harder it gets, the less it'll deform when it's when it's moving. So if you go like this and then okay, I call it the tensile teeth, is how I call these screw threads. Just give me a sec. It's taking a while to draw it. Hang on, I'll get a camera that I can look down on the sort of stuff with it. It's I kind of like the surprise, me doing the drawings and talking to you about it, and then the sort of surprise image at the end. So I might keep it this way. It's relaxed as well. It's not like I can make mistakes while I'm drawing and not have to go back over it. So yeah, it works quite well. So it's a dovetail. It's the way you describe the teeth. Dovetail screw teeth is the way you describe it. So it's like that. That'll be the screw teeth. So the blue would be the screw and the bolt would be the red. And that would be how you'd do super tiny threads. And the smaller that you make the threads, the more accurate you can make the screw. So that would be how you'd make super accurate positioning machines. You just have tons of the different size threads for the different coarsenesses of movement. So if you had just a normal, like say an inch would move it up and down, and then you'd use the ½ inch, then the ½ inch, and then you'd use gradients probably bigger than that. You'd probably go in tens, like a tenth of an inch, 100th of an inch, 1,000, a million, a billionth. So that'd be that. If you want to use what are they called, dial mechanisms, the smaller you make the dial for like checking the surface's size, the less deformation it'll make of the object. So if you miniaturize the dial mechanisms, you can measure super small accuracies. Okay, what else we got? Nesting. 23 minutes. I might go to 40 on this one because it's quite tiring. Okay, inventions. Look at that gel fat. It's because the light is mainly from the screen now rather than from the side. If I go like this, see, the gel fat really gets really obvious, but because the light was from the side. Oh crap. That's one of my playing cards. I have loads of these guys. I was learning Japanese, and I have a load of these playing cards. I call that Japan Blue. It's kind of a cyan and Japan Pink. They're two of my favorite colors that I think of when it comes to they're two of my favorite colors. Those two, cyan Japan pink and Japan blue, and I also like Japan black, or Japan and China black. The black hair of Asian women tends to be another one of my favorite colors, and red. That China red is also one of my big favorite colors. You kind of see a similar red to it, and the end stream button. If you ever go live on YouTube and there's the end stream button at the bottom of the stream, that's kind of my favorite color. Okay, nesting. I have so many nesting things, and I can't. The nesting. Oh yeah, I had crate rockets. It's kind of a nesting, I suppose. So there's if you look at a rocket from down the hole that's coming out, it's it usually has a shape, and that shape determines its burning pattern. So like if you have this shape, so instead of having there's rocket patterns in this, so that was one of them, was to have tons and tons of little holes, and they'd be really high pressured. Excuse me, and it make it accelerate really fast. That's one of my dreams, is to make rockets that accelerate as fast as bullets. Another shape would be what I call nested shape. So instead of having a gap in the middle, you just have rings, concentric rings, very, very thin concentric rings down the center. So it's like that. So that all those are the gaps. The blue bits are the gaps, and they'd be the gaps down the length of the rocket. So you're looking into the tail of the rocket, and there'd be tons of those concentric rings. So the amount of fuel being burned simultaneously would be really high, and you wouldn't have to make them that deep because they'd reach the same power as one of the longer rockets. So far they're kind of like what I'm looking at. What you need to be accelerate as fast as a bullet is you almost need to have a sort of like a flattened shaped charge, which is an explosive thing, but you need it to be so it explodes directionally like that, but it doesn't explode sideways, because in a cannon all the pressure is behind the bullet and it's being forced forward. Whereas in a rocket, you have to build smaller walls, and so part of the back of your rocket is also a wall. So you might look at shank shaped ends for your rockets, for your solid fuel rockets. Currently, aluminium is kind of the biggest fuel, and they use oxidizing agents, solid oxidizing agents. I have a thing called the centrifugal chimney engine, which is basically, it's an engine inside a centrifuge, but it can be used as a rocket engine, and that theoretically is a liquid fueled rocket that could probably be as powerful if you fed back, used the feedback of their spinning ring to push the fuel into the chamber. You could probably get close to the acceleration of a bullet with that, because the cone wouldn't be a parabola; it would be a circle, because it'd be going like a skateboard ramp. So the cone would be a circle, and you could get equal pressure across the whole thing. So it would be that could probably get close to, for a liquid fuel rocket, could probably get close to what a bullet accelerates at. You can do some interesting stuff then when you have that sort of acceleration. It basically makes a tank really really easy to destroy. So like if you had big giant tanks, the chances of destroying them are very high. Tank armor is interesting. There was one idea of tank armor I had, which was, I called it the stacked railgun. So a railgun is kind of like two rails like that, and it fires a third rail between it like that. And my idea was to turn that into a motor and just have layers and layers and layers of those beams of metal. So when the shaped charge goes pushing through, it would electronically turn itself into a motor, a homopolar motor, through the railgun effect. So you'd have railgun armor, and that would spread out that really fast movement through the armor really quickly. You see, the reason why shaped charges dominate so much is because the speed of sound, they actually get faster than the speed of sound in the material, and the material can't spread that load out through it. So they're just like a finger. They just push through huge amounts of metal. Beryllium is a really fast metal and could probably take on most shaped charges. But other than that, electricity is like the speed of light or close to the speed of light in the way it spreads. So it'd be able to spread that load across the armor much more quickly. So railgun armor was one of my other ideas. The other idea was to use a spark. I think you use 2 panels like that. I think the Brits were using an idea like that. You put a panel there and a panel there, and as the thing goes through, it explodes. The spark shoots through the material and spreads it out. I had also invented that myself, but I was also going to use a modified version where you had a capacitor, a giant capacitor inside your tank, maybe the size of a dustbin, and that would be connected to those 2 plates, so it could be a lot more powerful. When the electricity goes into something, it tends to spread it out. If you made it oscillate, it might actually it might be able to get it would. The sudden movement of electricity would cause it to only happen at the edges. So what you need sort of a mosaic of plates, so a mosaic of plus and minus plates over your tank armor. So the electricity is accelerating in the opposite direction, so it gets rid of that skin effect that the electricity is having. I thought the reason I'm talking about this stuff is because one of my inventions was World War Olympics. So the World War Olympics was one of my inventions, was take the armies all around the world who are currently doing nothing, and every 2 to 4 years hold the World War Olympics, and also hold the battle game, which is like the final of the World War Olympics, where everyone just has to pick their army, and they go into an arena and they all fight together to try and get victory. And so that would be the World War Olympics. And then you could test armor against weapons, and you could test flying ships and battleships and things like that. And you could use maybe cell clones. So in the other video, I talked about stem cells and using the lonely guy stem cells and putting it in a womb to create a clone of a person that is the person. You could use them as the actual, it'd be like being in 2 bodies at once at the same time. You could use that as the soldiers of those wars. So that's why I talk about war openly, because I have plans to sort of make it so it doesn't hurt people. Also, I had the idea of a gentleman's war, which is, instead of saying we'll fight your country and you'll fight mine and blah blah blah, is you step outside into an arena, and whoever's army wins the gentleman's war, the other army will then afterwards be forced to accept the conditions of the gentleman's war. Yeah, it's that's in my book, in my book, by the way. So if you enjoyed that idea, it's also in my book. Nesting, I'm gonna have to do another video on nesting too, because I had quite a few ones. I can't think of them now, to be honest with you. Like nesting numbers, maybe, like numbers that are, yeah, I had ideas for numbers which were like, you had, like, say, the number 2, and all the 2 on the inside would be the nested number, and then you'd have the outside 2, which would be also 2, but it's outside itself on the number line. And then you could have gaps between those and things like that. Nesting, nested hard drives. No, that wasn't it. Nested rotors. That was it. That was a good one. I'll end on nested rotors. So I'll put that over there, and nested rotors. So the idea of it's like the nested rotors like that, except it's inside each other. So if you wanted, instead of using a particle accelerator, you did a tin film accelerator. That was another one of my inventions, was a tin film accelerator or a wire accelerator. So you accelerated a wire instead of accelerating a gas up to close to the speed of light. And how that would work was you'd put what you call nested in rotor inside a rotor inside a rotor. So I'll use green for this one. So because I use blue for the pressure vessels for the liquids. So green, red. You could also use it to make orbital stations. So have have something orbit the Earth, because if you spin something faster around the Earth than gravity, you could have a sub-Earth orbit by putting it in a vacuum, and then using that to push things upwards. So anyway, nested rotors. So the idea was, so with nested bearings, that's what it is, nested rotors and nested bearings. So they're basically the same thing. So if you have a ring of metal, so this is looking at it straight on, this ring, and inside the ring you have another ring and another ring and another ring. Now, if you look at fluid bearings, they're basically an infinite version of this, of a ring within a ring within a ring. And there's only 10 miles an hour between each different one, but they add up to 100 miles an hour. Now, if you had one ring going 100 miles an hour, one ring going just stopped, you would have 100 by 100. So 100 by 100 is 10,000. You'd have 10,000 as the difference between those two. Whereas by going 10 by 10 by 10, each layer only has 100. So the amount of actual energy that it would give up would be far less per rotor. But then you can expand that out to the size of something like the Large Hadron Collider, and use sort of like nested magnetic bearings, magnetic gears, nested magnetic gears. And you could accelerate that up to close to the speed of light and create a ribbon or a wire that's traveling at about close to the speed of light. So that was another one of my ideas. Also for cars, it would be very efficient. You could use a thing I said in another video, which is a phobic bearing, which would make it very, very fast, and you wouldn't have to use ball bearings or raceway tracks or things like that. It would just be really, really slick and really, really fast. It'd be like ice skating. That's another thing, is ice skating was another idea of mine, which was a directional solid. So a material that's solid in one or two directions and liquid in another direction. And that was one of my ideas of how ice skates work, and also maybe another way to do phobic bearings. Okay, that's a near 40-minute video. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a fun day, and me, the inventor in my room, inventing as I go. I like doing it this way because it's simple. The explanation is simple. It's not complicated. It's not showy offy, and it's the way I like to invent. So these are my inventions. Tomorrow I'm going to have a go at actually building an invention, which is my siphon, my vacuum siphon. So I'm going to have a go at building that tomorrow. So hopefully I'll be able to put that up in the next few days onto YouTube, and you'll be able to see if it's any good, if it works. I'll try to go through it and explain it as I go. I want to talk about natural selection in my next blog and my next live inventing stuff. I like the idea of naturally selecting like huge versions of things, and like instead of having, because what's it called, wheat is self-fertilizing, so it's to just keep on picking the wheat that makes the biggest grains until you have huge grains that are like the size of your hand. So that's one of the things I want to mess around with. And then like natural selection is really, or artificial selection in plants is a really, really, really great way to make new materials and get certain chemicals. And it's not really done enough. It should be really done more. So for now, this is where I'm at. Ollie the Inventor, I'm going to stick on the light. That makes things a bit nicer. Ollie the Inventor out. I hope you enjoy your day, and peace and love and heavenly conversion, as they say in, what was that show or movie? Was it that Fifth Element? I think it was in Fifth Element. Yeah, peace and love and heavenly conversion. Oh wait, maybe it's some religious thing. My religion, by the way, is Boatism mixed with Shintoism. So I'm a Boatist. So what a Boatist means is that like both atheism and Christianity is true. For me, I don't want there to be a God. It doesn't suit me as a person. But in the Christian worldview, I think it suits them, and I believe that in their worldview, their God exists. In the atheist worldview, I believe I believe God doesn't exist, and in the agnostic worldview, I believe He's a mystery for them. Me, I don't believe in God. I think I don't like the concept of God. It doesn't suit my personality. The Shinto thing is started when I started talking to my college. I started just talking to it because I loved the place so much. I started talking to it, and then I started talking to other things, and it just suited my personality, Shintoism. So I'm a Buddhist and a Shintoist, and that's my religion. And goodbye, old friend, goodbye. I might do a thing about screws. Do I have another thing about screws and clutches and friction plates? I'd like to create an analog friction plate. Maybe a material that turns solid under electricity or something like that, or material that turns solid under pressure. That might be able to create an analog clutch. So it's kind of like an ollie liquid. So the more pressure you put it on there, the more solid it gets. It's sort of like polymerization, so pressurized polymerization. And that's actually another invention. So you're gonna get an extra 5 minutes out of me. So clutch. So here's the clutch, right? So here's the clutch. Here's the clutch, right? That presses. Oh wait. I have the liquid in. Where's the liquid? Liquid. Yeah. Liquid. Okay, so here's the clutch. Okay, so that is spinning as a spinning disc, and it presses into that liquid. And that liquid, the more it gets pressed into it, the more viscous it becomes. And then it connects to that. And that's a variable clutch, or a, what's the term? Not a variable clutch, you know what I mean. It's a analog clutch rather than constantly, once you connect the clutch, you only have it's connected or it's disconnected. It's kind of digital, the clutch in a car, but that's an analog clutch right there. Is a it either polymerizes and unpolymerizes under pressure and under lack of pressure, or it turns more viscous and less viscous under pressure, or it just the pressure turns it solider and solider. So that's the analog clutch. So that was just invented right there. I had another idea, which was depolymerization. So a material, I think I mentioned in another video, if you add, is for 3D printing. So if you add UV light to it, it starts to depolymerize, and you can use that to draw space into things. I always like to think Michelangelo's David, he said the statue wasn't there. I used to think the statue, or he used to say the statue was already there. He was just revealing it. And I used to think, no, the statue isn't there because you're painting with space. And that's what Michelangelo did, is he painted with space. And that's how that worked. So, yeah, that's the extra bits to the video. The polymerization clutch, which is just new, just there, and that's that. So thanks for watching, and stay sassy.